welcome to the next installment of the Port Haven book club reading of Aftermath. Aftermath Prime, as I like to call it, the first Aftermath book by Chuck Wendig. Today I'm going to talk about chapters 1 and 2. If you're unaware of what I'm doing or what this series is, go ahead and click on the thing, and it will take you to the first video and kind of explain what's going on. So like I said, I did chapters 1 and 2. We're going to kind of see if I like doing 2 chapters at a time, because it's probably how I'm going to run it at this point, but we're going to see. So chapter 1, the first actual meat of the story, was pretty exciting when it opens up, because it opens up with Wedge and Tilly's. Now, of course, Wedge is in the Star Wars films themselves, but this is kind of his first foray back into the expanded universe. Wedge is, of course, a part of the X-Wing novel series and Legends by Michael Stackpole and also Aaron Alston, depending on which story arc you're reading. And it was good to kind of bring him back in, albeit in a different role than we've seen him in Legends, but, you know, here he's out, he's scouting, he's a part of what's going on. Now, what is going on is what's interesting. It's about a year out from Return of the Jedi, and there's just little things that are the same but different than what we see in Legends. So a lot of what Wedge is talking about is how there's different parts of the New Republic, or the formerly the Alliance, the Rebellion, that's very disorganized. So I've written down here that Wedge doesn't even have a title, so he's very important. He's out doing important things. He's scouting Outer Rim worlds to try to find the remnants of the Empire. But at the same time, he doesn't even really have an official capacity, because they haven't really figured out what that is yet. You know, you compare that to other books that were a year out from Return of the Jedi, which I believe Trusa Bakura, that one was a year out, wasn't it? Oh, this is pre-timeline. Hold on. I could just look at Wookiee, but where would be the fun of that? Yeah. So Trusa Bakura, along with Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor, are all pre-X-Wing, and X-Wing starts at 5. So this is around the same time. I don't fully remember if it was, but I feel like it was a year. So you kind of look at that. I don't remember a whole lot of Trusa Bakura besides like the dinosaurs, because who can forget space dinosaurs? But I just feel like in Legends there was an easier transition with the New Republic. I feel like they just kind of eased into this government a lot smoother. What's going on in the Empire feels very similar, right? The Empire is fractured. We're going to see rival warlords eventually. I feel like they're playing up the New Republic a little bit differently, and this is an angle that I actually really appreciate. Another thing that's going on here that I really like is Wedge. It was Wedge's idea to go to the Outer Rim and look up planets to try to find the Empire. And side note, the planets he lists that he's going to, you have Akiva, which is new to this book, and then he listed another one that was just there, but the other planets he listed all appeared in Star Wars The Clone Wars, so they're already kind of connecting things to other parts of canon. But what it says, if you study your history, the seeds of the Empire started in the Outer Rim, which is really interesting that we get into this in new canon, because it's different than you might think. We like to think of the Empire was the Republic. We like to think of it as this democracy that was turned into tyranny because of Palpatine's actions. But the way Wedge is looking at it, if he's talking about the seeds of the Empire starting in the Outer Rim, to me, he's talking about the Separatists. He's talking about the side of the war that quote-unquote lost. Now, is this kind of a revisionist history thing? Is this him not wanting to see the Republic for what happened? Possibly. But at this point, they know Palpatine's a bad dude. And they know that Palpatine was Chancellor during the Republic and that he became the Emperor. What I'm curious to know is, to what extent do they realize that Palpatine was also in control of the Separatists? Because understand, Wedge is a friend of Luke, and that has not changed in new canon. Luke knows that the former Chancellor, then Emperor, was a Darksider, who was Darth Vader's master. If Luke Skywalker goes up to Wedge and says these things, and Wedge studies history, he, along with others, might be able to put 2 and 2 together, that the Sith, who are in charge of the Separatists, and the Sith who took over the Republic, and of course they know the Sith took over the Republic because of something Luke might reiterate, they might realize that Palpatine was playing both sides of the war. I can't remember if this has been addressed in Aftermath. I can't remember if this has been addressed in Bloodline. It might have been addressed in some of the comics I haven't read. If anyone out there is aware of this, please let me know, because I think this would be something that's kind of interesting to discuss. But I just really think it's interesting, and this is something I really like, how we talk about how we actually talk about the Separatists. Because a lot of this Legends material that you can't see because it's behind my chair, but like Thrawn Trilogy, X-Wing books, all of that was written before the prequel trilogy, before we knew about the Separatists and the Civil War within the Republic. So it's kind of interesting in this second draft that these types of things are actually getting brought up. There's this running theme of, and it was talked about in the first interlude in this, that wars don't stop. They just become other wars. In Legends, the war with the Remnant turned into the Yuzhan War and so on and so forth, but even then they were clearly different wars. But now in this new canon, it's this idea that is very applicable to our life here on Earth. That's something I find really interesting that they're breaching right off the top. We have rumors that Vader has tortured Jedi on Mustafar, which is interesting because we now know, thanks to Rogue One, that Vader has a castle on Mustafar, which I know is going to be addressed in some more comics that are coming out soon. So that's kind of cool that this book came out before The Force Awakens, so definitely before Rogue One. So it's already telling us that he had a castle on Mustafar. And I just like this idea that it's rumored that Vader tortured Jedi there, and I'm wondering if that's going to be a one-off or if that's going to be a thing that gets brought into other things. We hear Lando mentioned, so that's cool. So this is, obviously Lando's around if you read Last Shot, but it's kind of cool to just hear his name. And then we get introduced to Sloane, and we find out that the Empire is made up of leftovers, because the best and brightest of the Empire were on the second Death Star and on Darth Vader's ship. And understand that that best of the Empire is already the new best of the Empire, because the first best of the Empire was on the first Death Star. So the Empire, through many years, has slowly but surely been losing all of its best people, and you're kind of stuck. And she also talks... She uses a line called "Forget the Old Way," which will be discussed in Aftermath soon, but it's actually a shout-out to A New Dawn, which is the first of the new canon novels, where we first saw Sloane. She's not introduced in Aftermath. Anyway, I'll get into that at a later date. Chapter 2, get through much quicker because it kind of just hit home a lot of the same points, but we meet Nora, which is Space Winona Ryder, basically, and she is heading home, and what I find interesting is Wedge is out looking for planets that have the Empire in the first chapter. Here, Nora's with the smuggler, and the smuggler knows that the Empire has been to this planet. So there's this kind of disconnect between what this smuggler seems to know and what the former Alliance, now New Republic, seems to know. It also talks different things that Sloane says they knew that Luke was a Jedi, which is interesting to me because there's not a whole lot in the original trilogy where they would necessarily know that. The ones that would know that all died on the second Death Star. So that's something... I think if you read, like, the Star Wars main Marvel comic line, it becomes more aware that Luke is training as a Jedi, but I just do think that's kind of interesting. Because remember, we're going back here to 2015 and the months leading up to The Force Awakens release. So it's kind of cool to see what seeds they're laying down. And then we learn that Nora was flying with against the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi. And I believe there's actually a ship that they have pointed out is Nora's. So those are just kind of my thoughts on chapters 1 and 2 of Aftermath. I think, like I said, my biggest thing I would take out of those chapters is the notion of the Separatists and what do people from this time know of the Clone Wars and the politics of the Clone Wars, what's known about Palpatine, what might Wedge know because he's friends with Luke, as opposed to what the general person would have known. So that's kind of what I hit the most. So if you have any thoughts on that, please leave a comment and let me know what you think. If something else really stuck out to you in these chapters, that's cool too. Next video, I'm probably going to talk about chapter 3, and then we have an interlude. So this video is getting a little bit long anyway, so rather than do 2 chapters, let's say that for next week. It'll be a little bit shorter. But like I said, I'm not in an interest of rushing here. I just kind of want to talk about different points. Like I said, leave a comment. Make sure you're following us at Port Haven Forums on Twitter, and visit port-haven.com for even more. And if you are reading along with me, thank you. That means the world to me. If you're just kind of watching these to refresh your memory because you've already read the books, please still chime in. I'd still love to hear from you. Might bring up things. I'll see you next week. And we'll talk about this some more.